Our politically incorrect segment tonight. Now that there's a Republican back in the White House, dissent has become patriotic again. Judging by how much media coverage the so-called Women's March was given, we can expect more groups than ever will organize their own marches in Washington. After all, pretending to be a marginalized group is a badge of honor these days. The latest to get in on the act are organizers for a March for Science. These organizers claim they want the event to be nonpartisan. But here's the catch. One of the organizers said, and this is a quote, "There are certain things that we accept as facts with no alternatives." Of course, to the left, those things include evolution and climate change. So how can you claim to be nonpartisan when you're shutting down different opinions? With me now from ClimateDepot.com, producer of the climate realist documentary, Climate Hustle, Marc Moreno. Marc, hi, how are you?
Good, Liz. Happy to be back here.
Good to have you back. It's always fun to talk to you. It's always fun to talk to you. All right, first of all, let's start with the Scientist March on Washington, D.C. Are you going to go to that?
Yes. Yes, I actually went to the, let's not call it the Scientist March. This is the Climate Activist March on Washington, D.C. I went to the one in 2014 in New York City, and actually, it was a gold mine of material for my film, Climate Hustle. And what we did is, all you got to do is go out and film them. They had Earth prayer vigils where everyone had to be quiet and people were there kneeling down, praying to the earth, to the spirit of the earth.
So like paganism then. That's not just climate change, that's paganism.
Yes, but it was all part of that climate march. And of course, this is where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the last march they had in New York City, where he said that climate skeptics should be jailed. We should be at The Hague with all the other war criminals, in his words, with 3 square meals and a cot, because that's where we belong, in jail. So I'm expecting, the climate activists to come out of the woodwork. They're trying to dress it up, as you mentioned, as, quote, the Scientists March on Washington. But this is going to be all the climate activists. And, we've had, around the same time, there's going to be a big skeptic conference about a week before in Washington, 2 weeks before, and that's going to have all the skeptical scientists here. So it's a shame we can't get the two to meet and have a good clash, but I think the timing won't be right.
Yeah, good clash or a riot here. That's what you're hoping. What I'm hoping is that they have those posters about you that they had in Europe for the UN climate conference, where it said most wanted climate change skeptic. That was one of the best things that's ever happened to you. Let me ask you in a more serious sense, though, Marc. I don't think there's an issue between Republicans and Democrats, between climate skeptics and climate believers here. The issue is not whether climate change is happening. We can all see that the temperature of the Earth is fluctuating, that it always has fluctuated. The question here politically is whether the laws that our nation is trying to pass, Democrats are trying to pass, or the United Nations is trying to pass, whether those laws will impact the change and reduce it. Talk to me about that.
Yes. Yeah, this is a big thing. In fact, the media, and I've been on a couple different shows and talking to media outlets, talking about this very thing, the semantics of this. A Trump nominee will go up and say, I believe the climate changes. Then the media runs out and says, oh my gosh, he disagrees with Donald Trump on global warming. They say, Donald Trump, if you don't say global warming is a hoax, they think Donald Trump thinks any climate change is a hoax because he did a tweet in 2012. And he said he was joking, but the media doesn't get that out of their heads. So what happens is, yes, climate change is real. Yes, man can influence climate, but you can't distinguish man's impact from natural climate variability. How do we know that? We know that from temperature. The hottest year declarations are another. We just went through a whole round of that, Liz, last week, where they claimed hottest year on record. And it turns out it was 1/100th of a degree, literally unmeasurable, well within the margin of error of the data set by the land-based temperature surface data. The satellites still show the global warming pause alive and well. There is no acceleration in temperature. Extreme weather isn't getting worse. Polar bear numbers are increasing. Sea level's not accelerating. We know the human impact is not there to be measured and to be distinguishable from natural variability. So I think what's happened here now is, the way skeptics should explain it is very simple. There's hundreds of factors that influence climate. Carbon dioxide is but one. The idea that we can fiddle on the margins with one of the hundreds of factors and have a temperature or weather outcome that they predict. In the film Climate Hustle, we have a scientist saying it's, quote, scientific nonsense. And all you really have to do, as you mentioned, is look at a cost-benefit analysis. In other words, if we do this policy, what impact will it have on temperature or on CO2 emissions? And in the case of the UN, there's virtually no difference, even using the UN's own science. It would delay the temperature by not even 4 years, according to an analysis by a Danish statistician. In other words, it's all essentially witchcraft. They're basically saying, like, voodoo witchcraft. They can change the weather if only we pass these laws and treaties.
Right. Well, no, this is very interesting. I guess my reaction to some of this is, why? Why is my question. Why do climate change scientists then, why do they write articles about the warmest year on record, 2016, if they know that this data, I mean, scientists are supposed to work with data here. They should be able to tell that it's within the margin of error, that it's not something that's a significant variable. Why do they act like it is? Because, I mean, you didn't have to look any further than the trending topics on Twitter, your own Facebook news feed. I mean, you got notifications from all the major news networks, you know, to your phone talking about how significant this was, that 2016 was the warmest year. If it's not really significant, why do they try to make it seem as it is?
Well, we know even the climate activist scientists, the former NASA scientists who've been arrested 6 times, James Hansen, protesting the Keystone Pipeline. He endorsed a book calling for ridding the world of industrial civilization. This scientist actually said the hottest year declarations, quote, aren't particularly important, unquote. And we know they do it because it's part of their campaign cause. The media, you mentioned that, the media ran with it. Justin Gillis, the lead New York Times reporter, got an above-the-fold headline about the hottest year. You know what he omitted from that story? And it turns out the New York Times thinks its readers are either too stupid to understand something or they're deliberately leaving out information, and I believe it's the latter. He left out the fact that the hottest year claim was only hundredths of a degree well within the margin of error of tenths of a degree, and actually was called out on it, and he said that the readers wouldn't be interested in that kind of data.
Well,
in other words, the New York Times readers wouldn't be interested in the fact that the entire story was bunk. That's what he's basically saying, and that's what we're dealing with. It's a campaign cause. These NASA scientists, everyone thinks, oh, well, these are serious scientists that are studying the data. This is the agency that put men on the moon. The actual scientists who put men on the moon and engineers have condemned current NASA. The current NASA just recently had a scientist, again, who endorsed a book calling for ridding the world of industrial civilization, who gets literally arrested at every chance he can, gets handcuffed and taken away. These are activist scientists in charge of our federal temperature data, and everyone's all shocked. Whoa, they're making this big declaration.
Right.
Why would they be lying? It's not that they're lying, it's that they're juicing the system, they're running a campaign cause, and they're leaving out the vital information that their statistics are essentially meaningless.
I guess
the hottest year declaration is meaningless.
To me, it bullets down to there's nothing wrong with activism, believing in your cause and doing what you can to advance your cause. There's nothing wrong with that. It's called activism, but that needs to be separated from science. Science, there shouldn't be a political agenda wrapped within it or behind it. Scientists need to be able to challenge their own conclusions in order to make sure that they're not faulty. And when there's an area of science like this where scientists can't challenge it without being kicked out of the field, that to me is a big problem. Marc, thank you so much for coming on, addressing these things. It's always fun to talk to you. All right, guys, you know the drill. Talk to me. Tweet Liz_Wheeler, and we'll meet you back here in just a minute.